Good morning, everyone. If you are not on mute, we do set our sessions up to mute everyone, but to be doubly sure, if you want to double check and put yourself on mute, that's always helpful for us. And if we do have a question or need to speak with you, we can unmute you here and chat, but double check. Thank you all for joining us. This is one of our Training Tuesday sessions where we invite anyone in the state who wishes to participate to attend these sessions. And so we're really glad to see such a large audience that are attending. In addition to this session today, as always, this will be recorded and posted out so that you can share it with others that weren't able to make it. This is an important session, and it is going to address a significant change that will be effective on September 20th to the release off master process. So a very key and important training session, and we will get this recording posted out as quickly as possible, as well as all the supporting materials and documents, including this presentation and a job aid, to ensure a smooth transition over to the new release off master process. We think everyone is going to like the new process because it's a response to feedback that we received. Our presenter this morning is Amy Adams, and as you all know, Amy has been instrumental in the implementation of BidBuy and has been involved in the configuration, development, vision, design, and day-to-day operations for more than 2 years. So with that, I will turn it over to Amy, and Amy can present the new process to you.
Thank you, Lori. Good morning, everyone. So I just also wanted to let everyone know that we do have a chat feature if you're logged in online as well that we request you use when submitting questions. So up at the top where you see your bar, you should see an option to chat. So if you have any questions, submit them through that way, and periodically we'll take a break to answer them. All right. So some of this may look familiar to you.
Within your screen.
Oh. My apologies, I wasn't sharing my screen. So some of this may look familiar to you as we go through. It's been updated a bit, but if you attended the Train the Trainer sessions last week and also attended the session, the overview session that we did on this a couple of weeks ago, some of these slides are going to be the same, but we wanted to cover this process for end users and also provide some additional information and updates.
No, never mind. You're fine.
Okay, so goals and objectives. The goal of this training is so that the agencies will be able to utilize the enhanced direct release functionality. We'll go over exactly what that is. And the objectives are to understand the enhanced direct release purchase order process, create a change order to attach the executed bid by purchase order, create a change order to update the bid by purchase order to include the SAP purchase order number for three-way match if you are an SAP agency, successfully send the release purchase order to the vendor, successfully obligate as needed utilizing the bid by purchase order, and then establish a complete procurement file in BidBuy. I just wanted to clarify that BidBuy itself is not automated to obligate for use, but we are utilizing the bid by purchase order to help your fiscal and what they need for three-way match and obligating at the comptroller's office. All right, so key changes. The comptroller's office now accepts the bid by print purchase order for releases. And I did just want to clarify that this is just for releases. We're still working with the comptroller's office on agency-specific purchase orders or master contract purchase orders, but releases off master contracts, that bid by print PO is now approved. The SAP agencies will release off master contracts and bid by. This does not include those releases that you may have against your agency-specific contracts. So again, just master contracts. Minor updates in custom column field names, as well as direct release purchase order, will not automatically send to the vendor. So right now, that direct release purchase order goes from the last approval straight sent to the vendor. Now it's going to pause before it goes straight to the vendor so that you can attach that signed PO and also update any custom columns needed for that three-way match. This also applies to punch-outs that are set up for direct release. Okay, so benefits. The statewide approvals are received in one system. So those SPO approvals, GONBI, all of that are all in bid by. And the purchase order sends to the vendor. If applicable, the purchase order states the SAP purchase order number for that three-way match, and there's reduced duplication of work by utilizing the bid by print purchase order for releases. All right, so we have two steps, one for non-SAP agency and the other for an SAP agency. The demo today is going to kind of be a hybrid. We're going to kind of cover both, point out things, considering both statuses. But in general, we wanted to lay out the high-level steps for each type. So for a non-SAP agency, you're going to enter bid by and create that release requisition. Fill in all of those fields as appropriate and submit it for approval. Upon last approval, that release requisition will convert to a purchase order and ready to send status. In bid by, you would create a change order on that release PO to update the fields, including entering the obligation number in the old original contract PO number field as applicable. Again, if you have, a $25 release off something, then you would need to take into consideration your agency processes and requirements. So we're not, updating any of those. Steps continued. You will, through that change order process, obtain the signatures as needed on the bid by print PO and attach it. Once the updates are complete, you're going to submit that change order for approval and apply it so it sends to the vendor. All right, very similar steps for an SAP agency, only if you're going to have a PO-based invoice or if your agency holds inventory, we're going to check for that. We do have one question before we get started on this second process. Okay, so we have a question of, what is an SAP agency? An SAP agency is one that has gone live with that system. It's also known as the IL-ACT program and commonly referred to as ERP. So there is additional information out on our website. We have links out to different training materials. It will take you out to the IL-ACT training website so that you can peek around that information if you like. They have a nice overview information page that can be visited as well if you're interested. But I hope that helps to answer your question. If you need additional details, feel free to reach out. All right, so steps for an SAP agency. If your agency holds inventory, you're going to check and see if you have that item in stock. And through that process, you would create a shopping cart. If you do not have inventory, then you would enter bid by and create that release requisition. If you'd like, you can enter that shopping cart number in the Notes tab in bid by so that you don't forget it and you can go back to it later if you're going to be doing a PO-based invoice. You would then submit your release requisition in bid by after all those fields are updated for approval. Upon last approval, that release rec is going to convert to a purchase order and ready to send status. At this point, you have your purchase order and bid bias and ready to send status. Nothing's gone out to the vendor yet, so you want to make those updates. So we're going to assume that we want a PO-based invoice. So I'm going to enter back into SAP. I'm going to either update that existing shopping cart or create a shopping cart and route that for approval and convert to an SAP purchase order. After that, I have my SAP PO. I'm going to create that change order on that ready to send release purchase order and do the same steps that the non-SAP agency did, only I would update that old original contract PO number field with that SAP purchase order number. You're going to obtain the signatures as needed on the print PO, attach that as well in bid by, and then update any other fields and submit for approval and apply that change order so that you can have a sent PO that is sent to the vendor for them to fulfill. All right, so now we're going to get into our demo. I just want to make sure if we have any questions, and we don't. I'm going to try to zoom in so you can see the screen a little bit better. There we go. All right, so you can see that I'm in my VP role. You may have different roles in your agency, so you need to take that into consideration. But if you're doing any releases, you should be fine with this new process. I am also going to do this demo in the Bid by Training agency. That is where my master blanket PO is set up. So if you have access to the training site and you kind of want to look around in there, you can use that master blanket that I had set up. But for the demo today, I'm just going to do the release off of that already established master, pretend contract. So I'm going to use the quick by function and search for my item. I see that my enhanced direct release item is populated, so I'm going to buy 50 of those and add it to a new requisition. So at this point, it automatically begins my release requisition. It's in progress, and I am going to move along from there. I'm going to save. I'm going to go to my General tab, update my short description. Update my department and location. Some of those may already be defaulted for you, your department location, but if it needs to be updated, please do that. Otherwise, just double check and make sure it's on the right, it has the right information included. Before I move along, what I want to make sure that I have, though, is the correct type code. So I'm going to select this link right here and just check to see what this type code was on my master blanket. So it's competitive skilled bidding. Because I didn't do that as my first step, I need to refill out my information. If I had an agency reference number, I could place that information in here. Don't have any special procurement types. They don't need to do a link. If I knew what this information was going to be, so say I'm like a non-SAP agency and I already know this is the number that I'm going to use for my obligation, I could enter that in now. If not, then I can leave it blank. And then my release begin and end dates, these are two new fields that are added for this process, and part of what is needed to have your bid buy purchase order accepted over at the comptroller's office. So it may be rejected if you don't have this information, and we'll go over how it prints on the print PO a little bit later. But these are your effective dates for that. It's going to give me a warning sign. I updated my department location. Yes, that's fine, and I can move along.
Amy, I have a quick question for you. So when you're doing that, does it matter whether you're in the basic purchasing role or the department access role?
Potentially. Depending on your rights at your agency, you want to make sure that you're able to create a release requisition and then also create and apply a change order, or have that process worked out in your agency if you don't have that right. So if you get into this process, the direct release function is changing a bit, but the need to do a change order on a release to have your executed state signed documents is needed today. So shouldn't be too many concerns with rights and changes in roles within the agency. But if you do find you're having any trouble creating a change order or applying a change order, it's probably the rights that have been assigned to you in your role.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to check, yeah, my address is fine for my vendor. My address for myself, I can change these if I need it, but I don't need to, so I'm just going to apply to all items and save and continue. I'm going to go to the accounting tab, use my magnifying glass, and I'm going to choose not applicable because these other special types are not applicable. If your agency is requesting that you fill in any additional fields here, please do that. Otherwise, I'm just going to save based on percentage and rebuild for all items. I won't have anything on my routing tab because it's not been submitted for approval yet. And then for this order, I want to attach my pricing sheet, so let me just save this to my desktop real quick. And I'm going to save and exit. And this is just my supporting documentation. Again, you may have different attachments here. We've trained on that in the past. And we also have an appendix available on our training site that states, what attachments may be needed at this stage. The Notes tab is where I would place that shopping cart number or any other notes as needed. I don't have any reminders, so I'm going to go straight to the Summary tab. I'm going to check my work, make sure my information is correct. Looks good to me. So I'm going to submit for approval. So what I wanted to show you for this one, because we don't have approval tabs configured in Train, this is the screen when you submit for approval that would show all of those triggered approval tabs. You want to take a look and make sure that those approval tabs on this screen are those that should be triggered. If you don't see some that you feel should be there, or you see some and you're like, well, why are they here? It's especially important that if you don't see those that you know are needed, go ahead and click cancel and exit and reach out to your point of contact within your agency and or to state user to make sure that, for example, maybe your SPO, maybe it's an IT type of release or something that your SPO should be looking at. So double check the screen, make sure everything is there that needs to be. I'm going to go ahead and just add myself so you can see what happens. All right. Now my release is ready for approval. Since I'm approving it and it's my document for this demo, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to see, oh, my approval actions and save and continue. And you can see now that I have a new purchase order upon that one and only approval that was just granted. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to see over here to the right that is in ready to send status. I also see that I have these red errors, and these red errors are due to required custom columns that are needed on a purchase order. In general, in bid buy, if we have custom columns either at the rec, bid, or PO, we can't pick and choose what types we want them to appear on. So if it's an open market rec or a release rec or a release PO versus maybe a master blanket PO, those custom columns, if they're configured for a PO, they're going to show on a PO. So we're going to update the attachments, but we're also going to update these other custom columns. So to do that, I'm going to create a change order. It takes me straight to my items tab. I don't have anything to update on my items, so I'm going to go straight to my general tab. I don't want to update my description. I don't want to update any of this other information. The main things that I'm concerned about updating are the contract begin date, end date, the fiscal year. We have a release begin and end dates here, and we had discussions about, well, do we want to utilize these existing contract begin and end dates for this process? And it was decided that no, we don't. We don't want to cause any confusion with reusing those, but since they are required, we're going to fill out these dates in those. So the begin date is going to match, and the end date is also going to match. Also going to choose the fiscal year. This is where I would fill in my number. If you had filled it in on the release requisition, what you'll see moving forward, which you don't see now, is we would bring that number forward, so you wouldn't have to fill it in twice. I'm not going to update this master contract custom column. I'm going to leave it alone. And I'm going to move along to the address tab. Again, just double check these. Going to move along to my accounting tab. Going to select the not applicable because the other special types are not applicable. I'm going to save based on percentage, rebuild for all items. And the other thing that I'm going to do here now is add my signed PO document, which I need to save to my desktop. All right, so here I have both of these showing to the vendor, and I do not have them marked as confidential. Again, we have an appendix to help with what should be shown to the vendor, what should be considered confidential. I'm going to select Save and Continue. You may have additional documents here also. This is just for demonstration purposes. And one of the things that I wanted to point out on this screen, I would not encourage for this process writing anything here in this box. This goes to the vendor, sends them an email. So please take that into consideration in any of your change orders, especially those that you're not wishing to show the vendor. So not going to put anything there, but I do want to be kind to my coworkers. And so these comment boxes down here are very helpful. So these are at the detailed level, and I can put any comment in here that I want to help, whoever that may come look at this a year from now to understand, what I did. Again, same thing down here too for my attachment. So I'm going to save and submit that change order for approval. One of the things that I wanted to point out for this one is we were really just updating a couple of those custom columns, including that PO number as well as the attachment. It may trigger approvals in your agency for this change order, and it may not. So it's up to your agency and what they want to see, but it technically shouldn't be triggering like an SBO pass again, unless you've increased the amount or something for those items. So again, look at this screen, see what take into consideration what you changed and who should be triggered for the approval pass. Because if you've only attached the signed document and included that, that PO number, probably don't need to reroute again, to too many people. But if you've increased those item costs or quantity, that would probably be something that you would need to have rerouted for approval. So if you have any questions about how your approval paths are triggered currently, please reach out to state user. We're also going to be sending out a report for fiscal on release recs and POs. So we don't want, agencies doing all kinds of releases in here and then fiscal gets the invoices for them. So we have internal controls requested for that. Before I approve, I do have a question, so in case I need to go back, I'm just going to hold off there. So how do you determine the release begin and end date? So that, if you look in the SAM's manual on what the requirements are for obligating over there for release off of a master contract, they want the begin and end date. So it's the effective date of that release. So if you have an end date of 8/20 and you're not able to complete your order or things like that, then you may run into some problems. But if you have any questions about what those release begin and end dates are, look in the SAM's manual at the master contract section, and it kind of goes over what those dates mean. But they're pretty straightforward. It's just the effective dates for that order off master contract.
Yeah, and this is Lori. I would just add that you should have a standard approach across your agency and work directly with your fiscal department to make that determination as to how you are going to establish those release begin and end dates. That's a really good question.
Also, can you repeat what you would enter into the old original contract PO number? Yes. So I'm going to try to answer a couple of these questions. They're similar. Another question, do you need to do the accounting tab twice then with that rec and again at the purchase order? And then if over 20, would you do 2 change orders each time? I don't foresee needing to do 2 change orders, but let's kind of go back and review that old original contract PO number custom column and then the accounting tab. All right, so the custom column is on the general tab. And what you would want to place in here is either one, your obligation number, for lack of a better term, your contract number, right, for that release. And then if you are an SAP agency and you're doing a PO-based invoice, it would be that number, that SAP purchase order number. On the accounting tab, we will look into seeing if we can have that information from the release rec go over to the purchase order. So bear with us on that and we'll get back to you if that's, we're able to do that. But otherwise, yes, we do request that you come here and update that on the PO because these do help trigger those proper approval paths. And again, I don't think we're going to need 2 change orders. I think you should be able to complete this process with just the 1, as long as you have the timing correct between getting the signatures and having that SAP PO number, that kind of thing. So, bid buy, we do have an ADA. We received a question about if it's accessible for screen readers. We do have an ADA certificate from the vendor, so if you have additional questions about that, please feel free to reach out to State User. And then another question, so we have quite a few questions, so we'll just take a minute to go over these. What if you need to extend the date? Is that possible? I'm sure anything is possible. Again, you know, you need to do a change order to extend those dates in bid buy, and then work with your fiscal to ensure that if it is obligated at the comptroller's office, that they update their COD.
And if you were doing another change order for something like a date extension or for any other purpose outside of you know, what we're doing here in the standard process, the new process for doing release up masters, then you would want to follow the process or the job aid for that type of change order. So that would be something separate from the standard process, and then just look at your change order process or job aid.
All right, if we had a contract entered under bid buy, do we no longer forward C13 invoices to fiscal? I'm not going to touch on changing your processes within fiscal. If you would send an email maybe with some additional details, and we can walk through that with folks in your agency, but the purpose of this training is to kind of not change processes within your agency up to the point that it's not needed. So, you know, having the bid buy PO approved and being able to utilize that, yes, that's a change. Being able to incorporate the 3-way match on that bid buy PO, you know, but in terms of existing processes that may need to be further reviewed, we can discuss if you want to shoot us an email with some additional details. What do you do when an item isn't listed as an option for a release from the contract? You enter an open market item instead. If you do find that your item needing to be bought is not on a master contract, then yes, you would work with your procurement staff and potentially your APO and SPO to ensure that you are purchasing those items in the correct manner, whether it be through a small purchase or something more formal. And it would be an open market requisition.
Right, so in other words, Amy, you cannot combine release off master items and open market items on the same transaction within bid buy. You need to do them separately, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I would definitely recommend that. So it's a lot cleaner, less confusing to those who are reviewing and approving. There are two different types of requisitions, so you want to keep those separate. And we have another question. Remind me, please, why the contract is not listed as a master on the general tab when it is a release off a master. So we have built into the bid by PO some logic for it to recognize is that master contract, is it a master contract, yes or no? The release rec itself is not a master contract, so we leave it at no. The master contract purchase order, that is where it's marked yes, and only those statewide master contracts have that tab marked yes. So we always default it to no, and then CMS, DOS, CPO's office, whoever may be establishing that master would only select yes. All right, so that's the end of our questions right now. And I'm not going to add myself this time. I'm just going to go ahead and select automatic approval. I see all of my changes here. I would see my comments if I have them. And I'm going to apply my change order. So my change order is all done. I'm back at the summary of my release purchase order. All of my red arrows are done. I'm going to check my work, make sure everything is correct. I see my updated attachments. And I'm going to select send email and notify vendor because I want them to get that email saying, hey, I'm sending you an order. And now my purchase order is in that release sent status. I just want to make sure, I'm going to look at my notes real quick and make sure that I have covered everything before we move forward. Okay. So I'm going to pull up the print PO and go over that with you. Before I move forward, though, I did want to point out this PO acknowledgement. This is really handy. When the vendor logs in to their account and they look at this, they have two options. One is I acknowledge, and the other is I also want to send an email saying that I acknowledged it. So as soon as they log in and they do acknowledge that order, this would be updated here. So if you get to a point where, you know, I want to check, I want to see the vendor's responding and bid buy, do I need to reach out to them maybe with a phone call, you know, and let them know I sent this order? An easy way to check is right here. All right, so this is my print PO. This is what was approved by the comptroller's office for use. So I'm just going to go through the whole thing, and then I'm going to create a couple of change orders to show you how those work. So we should be on time for dismissal, but we do have just a little bit to cover. So I'm going to move pretty quickly through all of this. We have our header information up here. It has the document number and the number of pages so that you can tie them all together. It also has the PO date. It gives the title. This would say your org. And then we have some numbers over here. So what are all these numbers? We have, again, the bid by number. We have the logic saying this is a release off master contract. So the comptroller's office knows this is a release off of a master contract. And this is the master contract number. And then for the three-way match or for the obligation over at the comptroller's office, you have your contract or your SAP purchase order number built in there as well. In addition to that, I know you guys are probably familiar with the vendor information here to the left, my ship to, bill to information. We have some vendor instruction over here. And then, most importantly, those release begin and release end dates over here, again, needed at the comptroller's office. So please fill those in. Your bid by PO may be rejected if these are blank. Also, too, if you update your shipping, any of this information on the release purchase order, it would print here as well. But you also have your item information, your NIGP, your item description, quantity, unit price, unit of measure, all of that detail from your items tab and bid by with the total amount here. So what I typically like to say is, like, this is the net page. And you're going to see what I mean by that as we move forward with the change orders. But this page will always show what the order, what the PO and bid by looks like at that point in time. This is your signature page. Again, we have that header, ties everything in. And then we have other information down here that can be filled in, handwritten by the agency. None of this information is populated by the system, but it is there if needed for your agency. When this takes effect on the 20th, you will not see this obligation and master contract obligations, these first three rows basically, you won't see anymore because we have that covered and built into the PO. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create another change order. I'm going to see, though, first if we have any questions. You're getting the purchase order just signed once. So what you would typically do in this process is you would have your, so the question is just clarifying that we just need that print PO signed once. So again, it has to deal with the timing on how your agency decides to incorporate that SAP PO number and getting those signatures. So, but you really, at the point that you're getting the signature, you want to make sure that your print PO is filled out as needed so that you only have to get that signature one time, not have to go back again and get a signature because you've updated a number on that print PO. You will want to take into account the timing of it all, but in general, you shouldn't have to be going back twice for signatures. All right, so I have my sent purchase order, and let's say that I do want to change something that's not really important, maybe to the vendor. So I'm going to change or phone number. This may be important to the vendor, but just for sake of time, I'm just going to make that change. Go to my summary tab. I'm going to be kind to my coworkers and put a nice comment in here. I do not want to show this to the vendor, so I'm going to save and submit for approval. And apply that change order. So then when I go back to my print PO, I'm going to show you how it's reflected or not on it. And I already have it open. So I did not show this change to the vendor. So my net page is still the same. I don't see anything. Everything is just as it always was. So I'm going to close this. It's like magic, it's magic trick. And now I'm going to create a change order that I do want to show to the vendor. So I'm going to increase my quantity to 70, save and continue, go to my summary tab. I'm going to show this one to the vendor. I'm going to save and submit this one for approval. I'm going to do automatic approval. I'm going to apply this change order. And then I'm back at the summary tab of my print PO. And now I should see that I have, in addition to my net page and my increased quantity, I now also have my vendor change order number 2. And you'll see here with this one, we have an internal number up here at the top right. Technically, there have been 3 change orders. So we wanted a way to know what our internal change order number was. But again, it's internal. Not all of our change orders may be shown to the vendor. So we can track it up here at the top right, but then we have had 2 change orders that have shown to the vendor. That first one being the update for the attached PO, signed PO, and update to the purchase order SM column. Although that change order was done before it was in send status, it's still technically shown to the vendor, so will appear as the number 2 here. This document here shows what I changed. So if I didn't change anything, it's not going to print on here. So it's going to give me my basic information, but then it's only going to print those updates. So if I scroll down, I'm going to see nothing changed here, but I did increase my quantity by 20, and thus my cost by $2,000. And then it's going to show my net here in the gray bar to say my net change was 70, up to 70 now quantity, and my total cost is now $7,000. So we reflect both so that you can tie back this change and this net to that first page of the print purchase order. Again, we have a header, type everything together. So this is showing what was changed. My first page is showing always my net, what that PO looks like at this point in time. So what would happen if we changed the end date? So If you change the end date, that would just change the end effective date of your release with the vendor. So that's one of those things where you probably would want to get approval to extend that date. So I would definitely encourage you discussing within your agencies who would need to be involved with that and ensure that you have the approval to do so before you extend that date, because if it is a release that is obligated over at the comptroller's office, then the COD would need to be updated. So that's, we want to make sure that fiscal is heavily involved. In bid buy in general, it's important, but again, we don't want to end up where there are mismatched information between the COD and the obligation and what your fiscal understands about the release and what your other procurement staff or supervisors may understand that you were requesting for the release, and between what they approved and what you changed. You always want to make sure that you're conservative in those areas and you share that information. If you were to change it, though, just to have it appear on the print PO, it would be very similar to what I just kind of showed you with changing the quantity. I would go to the General tab. I would extend these dates out. Maybe I want it the 14th, so it covers a month, and then I want to make sure I update my other one as well. The PO is really kind of handy. I do want to show these changes to the vendor in that it knows that this is a release off a master contract. So the logic that's built into it, it will print certain fields and display those fields in a particular way. So if this was, an agency purchase order, the print PO would look a little bit different. We haven't gotten approval for that yet from the comptroller's office, so we're not covering any training on it, but in general, the print PO was designed and has logic built into it to recognize this is a release off of a master contract. So here I have my release end date now updated. Again, this is the net, so it's showing the PO at that point in time. And then now I have another change order number 3. My internal number is now is number 4, and it's going to tell me what I did. And that I updated these custom columns from 831 now to say 914. So it's a bit of a narrative when you're changing custom columns. It also shows a narrative when you're changing item information. So you'll notice here on our change order that I just demonstrated a moment ago that I changed my quantity from 50 to 70.
And Amy, can you slide back up to where the narrative portion of the change was? For our training purposes today, Amy did not go on the change order into each line item and update that information. So it's fairly generic. The custom field was changed from August 31st to September 14th. However, when you're doing that change order, as Amy said, so that we're kind to not only our coworkers but our vendors, you can edit those line items on your change order to say, contract begin date or contract end date changed from 8/31 to 9/14. And there is even a comment box below the line item where you can provide any additional detail or narrative explanation. Now, these are our, purchase orders and our change orders, so this is not the place to put in, 17 paragraphs of explanation. Mary called me, and then I talked to Joe, and we decided to do this. You just really want it to be concise, to the point, and explain why it is that you're making that change. But again, keep it very simple.
I'm just looking at a couple questions that have come in. All right, so to clarify, the comptroller's office expectations. What we are doing with this bid buy purchase order is we are basically complying with the master contract release section and the SAM's manual. So the release begin and end date, that's part of it, but in addition to that, the signature, you want to have a signature too. At least these state appropriate signatures, and that information is in the SAM's manual in that section. Does the comptroller's office need the SAP purchase order number to process the order? If you are an SAP agency and you are doing a PO-based invoice, then they will expect that number. At least they will expect it, in addition, printed on the invoice is my understanding. So what we were trying to do with this SAP purchase order number is make it very clear to the vendors what that number was, so they could include it on the invoice that they were submitting to the state. So I know that there's been some struggle with that, so this is to help fix that issue, telling the vendor, hey, when you submit an invoice, put that number on the invoice for your three-way match. Are all release off masters being obligated at the comptroller through SAP, or only releases over the contract threshold? Since that's a little bit out of my jurisdiction, I'm just going to give a really basic answer. I believe it is determined on if you are going to have a PO-based invoice or not. If not, then I believe that threshold is $20,000. But again, please work with your agency super user or reach out to Steve's team to really kind of ensure that you're following the correct, expectations and instructions in SAP, so that you can include that PO number and bid buy if needed. So I know some of the agencies, they may always want a PO-based invoice, maybe over $5,000 or something. But so talk with your agency, talk with your super user, determine what your internal practices are versus what's actually required over at the comptroller's office. But nothing is obligated through bid buy. Just to also reiterate that bid buy does not connect to anything over at the comptroller's office.
For releases off masters.
In general, we don't have any interface with the comptroller's office, so there isn't any automated obligation happening from bid buy. Now, we do have the interface with SAP, but I'm going to cover that here in just a moment to make sure we're clear on that also. All right, so agency considerations, again, what we had mentioned a little bit earlier, depending on your role, but in general, DA users are, if you are a DA user and you're expected to complete this process, you want to make sure you have the ability to create change orders. Shouldn't be too much of a change with this anyway. So just a note, the IOC and the print purchase order, the purchase order complies with the comptroller requirements for release off masters. The purchase order may be rejected if certain fields are left blank, such as that release begin and end date, as well as, those proper signatures that may be needed. Please work with your agency, procurement, or fiscal if you're not sure on those requirements, and submit feedback to us at stateuser@illinois.gov so that we can continue to improve our training and supporting documentation. The bid buy team is working with the comptroller's office for approval of an agency-specific and master contract bid buy purchase orders. So again, although that PO is out there for those open market or master blanket POs, it's not been approved. That print PO has not been approved for that. It's only been approved for release off masters. A bid by SAP release off master interface. The current interface covers master blanket purchase orders. Those are the only type of bid by purchase orders that are sent through the interface. Release off master purchase orders are not sent through the interface. Would there be a future interface with release purchase orders? Not at this time. There aren't any discussions underway for that type of interface. So next up, the transition date for this is August 20th. You will not see any changes in production until that transition date. So then when you come back on the 20th and you're doing your releases, then that's the point in time you'll see those direct releases go to ready to send status instead of straight out to the vendor. Again, that includes punch outs that are set up as direct releases. And then please communicate these changes to your vendors so that they understand. We're also coordinating training with the vendor community, but we have had much better communication and change, and you have your established relationships with your vendors, so communicate this to them that they're going to have the attached bid by PO there to view, and also that three-way match for the PO, that SAP purchase order number. So we are covering it on our side, but again, cover it on your side as well. And then I know we're short on time, but I'm going to follow up on questions real quick. Will the custom fields be required on Grainger orders? Yes, so as applicable. So those release begin and end dates, that's where, like with the Grainger punch out, instead of that PO going straight to the vendor, it's going to stop on that ready to send status. So you can make those same updates that we covered today to ensure those fields are populated as needed. We were receiving some complaints that although the punch out was fantastic, the agencies weren't able to technically, execute that release, have that signed document before they received the order. So the timing of it, Grainger, was fulfilling those orders faster than we could sign, our state needed documents. So this is to help with that, ensure that you have those proper documents in place before the vendor starts to fulfill that order. If ordering is completed via online login, do we still send the purchase order for signature? Yes, I mean, those signatures, and again, we received a question last week, well, what if it's my $15 release? Talk, to those within your agency on what you need. If you have any questions about the procurement and what's required, reach out to your APO or SPO as well. I don't want to interfere in those processes, so talk to your agency or your SPO. What if you just wanted to add a date to a purchase order, like a hotel date on a bid buy for a conference. So that kind of gets into like an open market or a master blanket type of PO, and you would update an existing purchase order via the change order process. As Lori said, there's a change order manual that's out there that can be referenced. Again, if you ever have any questions about what you're doing, reach out to your APO, your SPO for those process type questions. If they can't answer it for you, then shoot an email to state user and be seeing them so that everybody gets the answer back. So, our typical process in general is if I have a question, I'm going to ask my trainer, my APO, my SPO. If none of them know the answer, then I'm going to reach out. The SPO is going to reach out to state user for follow-up. Again, if you're having a technical issue, reach out to state user if you're getting errors, things like that, and it's not familiar to you. So, but process questions in general, please follow that. Lori goes over it in the Thursday support webinars. So I do not have any additional questions submitted. If for some reason I've missed one, I know that there's different functionality. We use the chat feature, but if you've submitted a question and it didn't seem to get answered today, feel free to reach out, and I'll do my best to address your questions. And thank you for your time, and that's all we have.